Death Note 2, The Last Name, movie review. So this is Death Note 2, which is obviously a follow-up to Death Note 1. The two movies are, it's not so much a sequel as it is just kind of the end of the story. It's just kind of one story that's split into two movies. I went into all this in my background with the movie and a lot of the baggage during my review of the first Death Note movie, and I don't want to repeat that all here. I'm just going to give a few brief thoughts about Death Note 2 and then call it a day. So if you want to find out kind of where I'm coming from or whatever, I'll link down below, I guess, to my review of the first Death Note movie. So, as I mentioned in my review of the first Death Note movie, I had some problems with the themes, or namely, I was, I guess, not impressed that the message that this movie was sending was complex enough to kind of warrant all this time that they spent on it. And I continue to have that reservation, but even if the themes are not increasing in complexity, at least the plot structure is increasing in complexity at this point. So now we've got 3 people running around with Death Notes, not just one, but 3 people have them. And we've got kind of 2 death gods who are now inserting themselves into the plot more. So things are beginning to get more interesting. I still think the premise of these movies is a little bit ridiculous for all the reasons I said in the first review, and in fact it's even compounded more so in the second movie. But the battle of wits between Light and L is interesting to watch. Occasionally they make a leap of logic that I couldn't quite follow. And who knows, maybe this was because I was watching these movies in Japanese and maybe I missed something, I don't know. Occasionally I thought there were kind of leaps being made. But for the most part, or at least at its best moments, there's some real like Sherlock Holmes stuff here, where people kind of pick up on like minor observations and then are able to kind of make brilliant kind of deductions from that, which, you know, to give credit where credit is due, it was quite clever at a couple points. There are some new characters in this second movie. The biggest addition is Misa. Now, Misa appeared briefly in the first movie, but didn't have much of a role. That was largely just to set up her character from the second movie. She is a big fangirl of Light and his campaign. And then she gets a death note from one of the death gods that allows her to kind of participate in the killing herself. Now, again, I was living in Japan for several years, and I was aware that there was some problems with depictions of women in Japanese media. And I'm not, at this point, confident enough to say whether it's a big problem or a small problem. Like, I'm not sure if this I didn't watch enough Japanese media maybe to the point where I could say that this pops up a lot, or maybe this just pops up sometimes, but it's an issue of some degree, where women are kind of portrayed as kind of like overly cutesy and femininity, and I don't know. Misa represents a problem. Very high-pitched voice, overly cutesy gestures. She's portrayed as completely childish. I mean, she's a grown woman, but portrayed as childish, pouting, childish bursts of enthusiasm. She meets Light and she immediately just throws herself at his feet, literally, tells him she wants to be his girlfriend, completely devoted. And then she just plays a part of an obsessively devoted girlfriend. And in other words, she's not like a real woman. She's like a male fantasy of what a cutesy woman would be like. I don't know. There's also a scene in which she gets caught by the police, and the police are in a little bit of a dilemma here because they know that she's got kind of power to kill people. So they don't want her to kind of see who they are, know their identities. Which, okay, I'm tracking with that. I understand the logic with that. But then they restrain her in like this completely S&M bondage type of way. And in my initial review of this, I was maybe a little bit too generous. I was saying, okay, like I know they have to restrain her, but I'm a little bit worried that maybe there could have been a more dignified way to do it. I've since read reviews by kind of people who are more familiar with the genre than I am, who say, oh, this is just pure fan service. I was so naive at the time, I didn't even know what that meant. But I guess fan service refers to kind of a needless sexualized depiction of the women as just kind of a service to the male fans of the series. And apparently people who are familiar with the anime, with Japanese anime or Japanese, more familiar with this genre, just kind of immediately pick that up as fan service. And yeah, it's completely notable that when Light gets detained by the police, it is nothing like that kind of bondage that happens when Misa is detained. Okay, to wrap this up, I do have to admit that there are elements of the story I found kind of interesting, but it wasn't 270 minutes worth of interesting, which I think is about the run total of both combined movies. I finished the first movie and I'm like, okay, now I guess I have to rent the second movie. I would have been a lot happier if they would have combined this into one movie. And they could have easily combined this into one movie. I think what's going on here is this is based on a much longer manga and a much longer anime series that had a lot of different, more plot points in it. And so to try and kind of keep the fans of the original source material happy, and to try and include a lot of the beats that had been included in the original source material, they extended this out of 2 movies. But as a movie, just as its own thing, saying this as somebody who's not read the manga and who's not seen the anime, it totally could have been one movie. I think it would have been better if they would have just combined it into one movie. So for my money, I can't really recommend this. I think this movie is longer than it needs to be, talking about both of them combined. And I don't think it justifies the time spent on it. That being said, there are a lot of fans of this movie. So take my opinion, as always, with a grain of salt, and maybe read some of the reviews of people who really like this movie.